Right. Hello, everybody. Will have to forgive me. I'm fairly new to the Bay Area, so I'm still figuring out how to forcibly explain my startup idea to everyone I make eye contact with. Right. So I'm John. I'm the one on the left. That's my proof. The fluffy ball of crazy on the right is Oscar. He's pretty much how I rub a duck program, except with a rabbit. In case the accent didn't tip you off, or that there, I come from a small country 8,000 miles away. I do software, hardware, infrastructure, various things in between. I have a piece of paper which says that I'm legally allowed to blow things up. I am currently open for work, so if, like someone at a previous talk, you have a large piece of heavy machinery that needs testing for various security things, I would really like to talk to you. And I have seen a lot of things, and I have broken a lot of things. And I'm pretty sure I've seen at this point code that is beautiful and code that has probably opened unstoppable portals to the underworld. So, I'm going to be talking about a fair few things today. So if you want more information on any of the papers or research I'm going to be citing, you can find it here. Quick disclaimer, I'm not representing my employer. Some of the photos in this talk may not be my own. Please don't accidentally sue yourself if you set yourself on fire during the course of this presentation. Right, so since I have so much stuff to show off today, we're going to do this quick fire style. So, we're going to talk about why computer security has failed in the past. We're going to talk about why computer security has failed in the present. We're going to talk about computer security will fail in the future. Point being that security is horrible, and I'm going to tell you why, because I love you. And if my parents' divorce has taught me anything, it's that when you love someone, you tell them horrible things and then leave them for someone younger. So, we're going to be primarily learning through fail, meaning that I am going to take a thing, I'm going to show you why that thing has caused another thing to die a horrible, fiery death, because as much as we love to listen to lovely, fluffy talks where everything goes right, we very rarely talk about when we actually do things wrong. So, as an example, you may think that this is quite a nice pun. You are a cute tea pie. I, in a chain of events that resulted in a very awkward conversation, interpreted this as you are narrow, scolding, and irrational. So, the goal here is basically to help you guys out by process of elimination. So, effectively, by explaining what we've done wrong, it should help you not to do that. Because if you can't laugh at yourself, well, laugh at other people. Seriously, it's amazing. So, we're going to talk about how your light bulbs can spy on your home. We're going to talk about why all your work doors basically have no locks because of bad user sanitation. There will be no therapy provided. People will be crying in the streets. The system is broken. We are all destined for eternal failure at the hands of an unfeeling red team. So, let's talk about computer security. So, let's start with a fundamental truth. Humans have been failing since the dawn of time. It took us a whole millennia to stop failing at trade. It took us several hundred more years to start to learn how to use fire correctly, and then several hundred more after that to invent a group of people to stop the types of people who used fire so badly that they literally burnt the house down. So, while the best way to get management excited about a disaster plan is to burn down the building across the street, I doubt corporate will be very happy when they come in from their BMW in their second holiday home in the Hamptons to find a receipt for $200 of gas, firelighters, and a slightly singed access control card. Because we live in a world where, when I say the word car keys, you think of these, when in reality I'm talking about a folder called car keys in the file of your Tesla Model S, which contains an RSA key pair to the private VPN it contacts in order to inform God Emperor Elon of your every movement. So, problem number one, too many sockets. Literally everything has a socket nowadays, and the reason that's bad is because from a security perspective, every open service you have running on your machine is an entry point. It's a way for someone to attack the system. And what we're doing now is we are adding these to our home. And in the modern era, you've got to have some of these, but the less the better, because then you reduce the amount of entry points, your doors. So when we are designing these systems, we really need to be thinking about the types of connections that we're making in order to contain them. Now, this wasn't always the case. There was a period a while ago. I mean, like, back in the 60s, we were worried that people were going to wiretap our homes, and now we're just like, hey, wiretap, can cats eat pancakes? This is the point we have gotten to now. It's awful. And the gist of this is effectively that the more devices you have, the more doors you have, the more entry points you have. And the biggest issue with this is that being on top of being generally bad, most of these systems are being checked from a security perspective by the people who built them, which is like hiring Winnie the Pooh to consult on honey security problems. It's going to end very badly for you. So, let me give you a real example of why the Internet of Things is potentially going to kill us all. So, there's a particular brand of smart light bulb which is configurable via smartphone. So the smartphone sends a command to the light bulb, which then forwards that command to all the other light bulbs over a local wireless mesh network. Now, you can use Wireshark to analyze the packets going across that mesh network. Now, in case you missed that last sentence, you can analyze the packets being sent by light bulbs. This thing doesn't even care. It just gives up the ghost. It's like, oh man, you got me. Here's my firmware information, my Wi-Fi password, and my mother's serial number. Because at this point, I'm pretty sure that Thomas Edison didn't envision his brand new invention for bringing fire-free light to millions of people to result in an entire house turning into war games and making you play several rounds of global thermonuclear war just to cycle the garage door. Because we all know that when it comes to broken garage doors remote controlled by light bulbs, the only winning move is not to play. So, if you sniff the traffic, you can quickly figure out that the light bulbs exchange your Wi-Fi password. However, they exchange it in an encrypted form, so you can't just sniff it normally, except that if you reverse engineer the light bulb's firmware, you find that every single one of them has the exact same key used for mesh network encryption, meaning that if you beat one of them, you can decrypt the network of every single house that uses this particular brand of smart light bulb. And at that point, if you can leverage that, that means you have access to the whole wireless network, and you can access things like your IP cameras, because we are now inside your network via LNS, or light bulb network insertion. And this is where things start to get fun. And at this point, this thing is such a disaster that Ja Rule's trying to promote it. Yeah, so this brings us to what we can do now. So this camera is an absolute beauty. Audience participation time. The little green light at the top, what do you think that means? Yep, right, okay, so if you said the camera is on, you are completely and utterly wrong, because it is not tied to power, it is not indicative of the actual state of the camera, and it can only be, it effectively just turns it off when you flip it off or into standby mode, effectively, in the web UI. And I would go into the 10,000 reasons why you shouldn't trust what the manufacturer tells you, because they claim that if it's in standby, it doesn't actually send any video to the internet. But at that point, that ship has sailed, come back to port, been shot down vigorously, been vigorously shot at, sunk, dredged back up, and then sailed again. And, you know, well, they could just put the LED, like, directly connect it to the power line, but they didn't do that, because reasons. Yeah, that's not good. Yeah, if you thought that was misleading, say hello to the peacock mantis shrimp, which is not a peacock, a mantis, or a bloody shrimp. And the fact of the matter is we already know that these things are being leveraged on a massive, massive scale. This guy's Brian Krebs. He does a whole bunch of security reporting. He did an article on a very large $600,000 DDoS for hire service, which resulted in the arrest of 2 people. Undeterred by that, 2 of their associates then used a network of IoT devices to hit his site with a 600 gigabit per second attack, which is double what the spam house attacks were, and they were described as dangerously close to internet threatening. This is twice as large, doesn't rely on misconfigured DNS, and was entirely powered by missecured Internet of Things devices. In fact, when I originally did the original version of this talk on the 3rd of October, a tool called Mirai had just released, and not only could it reinfect devices within 30 seconds of their rebooting if they maintain their default password, but it could do all of this remotely, and at one point had as many as 380,000 clients, which is nothing because Bashlight also had 1 million clients at that point, and that's nothing because if, well, it's terrifying, because at this point, unless you're at a Trump rally, having 1,380,000 people angrily shouting at you is an uncommon and rather troubling occurrence. So, the thing that I really love about this segment, though, is the fact that when I originally gave this talk, I had some web pages in it, and they weren't working. So I get off the stage and realize that someone had literally just used Mirai to take out Tine DNS, which then proceeded to take out half the internet, because we aren't changing default passwords. So, continuing with access control problems, we are going to open some doors for you guys. Namely, every door in this airport, most hospitals, and every single branch of US Bancor. Because what all these buildings have in common, besides all of them being parts of a giant game of corporate monopoly, is that they use a company called HID for access control. Now, if you've ever been in a secured area, you've probably seen one of their types of card readers standing guard over a door. And each one of these card readers runs back to a lovely grey box called a door controller. And this handles a whole bunch of things, including locking, unlocking, scheduling, alarms, etc. So and in order for it to adequately integrate into existing setups, it has a network service called Discovery D built in, which allows you to query it, and then it will send back some lovely information, like the MAC address and a rough common name of what the connected doors are. Problem is, it has a couple of undocumented features. For example, the ability to change the blinking pattern of the LED. So you send it a blink command with the number of times it blinks, and then it builds up a path to mount apps bin blink, and then calls it with that particular argument. Okay, pop quiz. Who can tell me the glaring problem with this? Yeah, no sanitization of any of the user input being fed directly into system. So that means that if we send a Linux command wrapped in backticks, it gets executed by the device as root. Which means that with a few simple UDP packets and no authentication whatsoever, you can unlock every single door connected to that controller. And you can do it in a way that makes it completely impossible to relock them. Additionally, because this can be done over UDP broadcast packets, you can do this to every single door controller on the network at the same time. And yeah, it will not end well for you. But no, that is not true terror. If you really want true terror, all you have to look into is the face of the Business Software Alliance's anti-piracy weasel. You think I'm joking? This is apparently the Business Software Alliance's anti-piracy weasel, and it gives me nightmares. So, at this point, I'm buying stock in single malt whiskey distilleries. But if you thought this was the end, you underestimate the internet entirely. Because it gets worse. Did you know that touring speakers have web servers built into them? Additionally, you can send it an MP3 and it will play it. This couldn't possibly go wrong. Here's a ticket barrier I found in Amsterdam trying to boot Linux. Here's a bunch of Internet of Things connected teddy bears that casually leaked 820,000 users worth of voice messages. Here's a Bluetooth connected toothbrush with interactive brushing games. Whatever the heck that means. Here is the world's most sociable shoe. Or at least it was the world's first sociable shoe until Qualcomm patented it. Here's an HDMI cable with built-in antivirus. I think this needs no introduction. And at this point, it gets even better, because we are going to explain how to make a train disappear using buffer overflows. That's the worst pun in this. Well, technically not buffer overflows, but I thought the pun was worth it. So, let's clarify that a little. What we're going to do is demonstrate how to make a train disappear from the signaling network, which is arguably far more dangerous. And in order to explain how this works, we first have to explain how integer overflow works. So, in simple terms, you can think of it like a car mileage counter. Odometer. So computers operate using registries which have limited amounts of space, and if you give them more than their maximum, they will do one of two things. They will either saturate, where it simply sets the registry to the maximum amount that it possibly can hold, or it will wrap, where the next addition will set off a chain of carry-on additions all the way down the line. But danger, Will Robinson, danger, because this red bit has been carried outside of the memory space that the system is reading. So when it combines the two, what it actually sees is this. And that's critical, because effectively what we've done here is take 3 eggs, throw together the eggs, and then somehow end up with no eggs. Which is, yeah. The result of that is that it is the exact same thing with train signaling systems. Because one of the many ways that trains operate in terms of signaling is that they use a device like this called an axle counter. And like the name implies, it counts the number of axles going in and then compares it to the number of axles going out in order to determine if the same amount of train went in as left. Now, the problem with that is that in certain countries, the equipment was built using 8-bit microcontrollers, meaning that if you have a train with more than 255 axles, it will completely disappear. And as you can imagine, the ramifications of that can be quite problematic. So, onto a lighter topic. Let's talk about time travel. So, we're going to make this phone think it's traveling through time, and then proceed to kill it because it's traveling through time. So, the way that most phones know how to get the time is through a protocol called NTP. So it synchronizes the time with the server using some form of highly accurate clock. The problem with this is that back in April last year, there was a fairly severe bug in iOS that completely bricked the phone if you set it to January 1st, 1970. Several theories ranging as to why it did that, from integer underflow to code signing just refusing to load the firmware because the start date would be afterwards. But it was quite bad because the only way to fix it was to force a firmware upgrade. And this is compounded by the fact that effectively, the way this normally works is that you send the time off to a server, and it'll send you the time back. However, until a second patch came in after they patched the original dying if you set it to 1970 problem, you could spoof time.apple.com on your Wi-Fi network and then point it to your own server, and then simply send every device that connected it a lovely new date. And suddenly, you're playing the role of the Apple Grim Reaper, and every single thing that connects to that network, regardless of, well, if it wasn't patched at that point, it would immediately die. So, I have just told you a whole bunch of horrible things. However, the point that I really want to make known with all of this is that most non-technical people aren't going to be able to poke through a door controller or decompile a light bulb. There is a very special level of responsibility assigned to people who understand these systems in order to take the initiative in making sure that they aren't harboring things which we have no idea what they're doing in the background. And all of this effectively boils down to the fact that some people wrote bad code. Now, this can be kind of subjective. This is, for example, the output of a neural network which is designed to generate plausible-sounding food. Now, some of you may think this is bad code because of the results. Personally, I think that this sounds like the instructions for new bean and pickle flavored Soylent, and this is completely insane. And so, after going for the obvious solutions, in true corporate form, I present you with the rule of 3 bulletproof list of bulletproof bullet points. So, we start with analyzing things. Look at what you're designing. Look at the items around your house. Look at your daily life. Play devil's advocate. See what you can immediately spot as a chink in your armor. Minimize. So when you're designing or buying devices that are going to go in your home or directly connected to your network, try and avoid introducing things with overreaching access. Not that you should completely drop these things purely because they have the potential to be bad, but understand that every single one of these that you introduce will add a risk. And finally, educate. Be inquisitive. There is nothing that I love more than someone who's willing to actually poke under the hood of this stuff and get down and dirty in order to make it better. If this talk can convince one more person to realize that in reality, reverse engineering isn't some kind of black art that takes years of training, or that network security isn't just about having the infrastructure people do it. Because, well, everyone can do it. You can do it. All we need is someone to do You can do 90% of the security with 10% of the effort, and all you really need is someone in the right place. And if that happens to be you, then I highly advise that you take the initiative. But if I have to leave you with one thing, then I am going to let it be this. Just remember that if you're ever having a bad day, Symantec once sold a globally valid certificate authority to a company without physical security, access control, or any type of audit logging. Thank you very, very much for your time. I will be available just after this if you have questions. The best place to find me is Twitter. And have a great signal.